There are some mornings when I can tell what kind of case it's going to be before a single word is spoken. That morning it was the walk. Not nervous, not respectful, not careful, confident in the wrong way. He walked into my courtroom like he had already won something, like this was a formality he planned to endure, not a place he planned to respect. "Be seated," I said. Everyone sat. He didn't. He leaned against the defense table, arms crossed, scanning the room like he was bored, like this was beneath him. I looked at the file in front of me. Last name, Hale, age 23, charge disorderly conduct, resisting an officer, verbal abuse of court staff, and one line that explained everything. Father, Police Chief Daniel Hale. I'd seen this pattern before. Not always loud, not always aggressive, but always confident that consequences belong to other people. "Mr. Hale," I said, lifting my eyes from the file. "Please stand," he smirked. "For what?" he asked. That question landed heavy. "For the court," I replied calmly. He laughed. A real laugh. "You're serious?" he said. "My dad's downstairs talking to your security." There it was. Not a threat, not a request, an assumption. The courtroom shifted. People felt it. I folded my hands on the bench. "Mr. Hale," I said, "your father's job has no authority in this courtroom." He tilted his head, amused. "Sure it does," he said. "He's the reason half the people in this building have jobs." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "In this room," I said, "the only authority that matters is the law." He shook his head slowly. "You judges always say that," he replied. "But when things get real, you call people like my father." That sentence told me more than the file ever could. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about alcohol. This was about identity. He didn't see himself as a citizen. He saw himself as an extension of a badge. "Mr. Hale," I said, "do you understand why you're here today?" He shrugged. "Some cop overreacted," he said. "Next question." Behind him, I saw an elderly man straighten his back. A young woman clutch her purse. They weren't angry. They were tired. Tired of rules that felt flexible for some and rigid for others. "You were arrested," I said, "for verbally abusing an officer, refusing lawful instructions, and insulting court staff." He scoffed. "They work for my dad," he said. "They need thicker skin." That's when I removed my glasses. I don't do that often. When I do, people notice. "Mr. Hale," I said slowly, "you didn't just insult them." He rolled his eyes. "You insulted the institution they represent." He leaned forward. "And what are you going to do about it?" That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. Because the second someone believes they're untouchable, the court has a responsibility to prove otherwise. I looked directly at him. "Sit down," I said. He didn't. "Sit down," I repeated. Still nothing. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be an ordinary punishment. This was going to be historic. I didn't have to turn my head to know who had arrived. The room told me. Posture changed. Breathing shifted. That quiet assumption crept back in. Now things will change. They always think that. The police chief stepped inside. Full uniform. Chest straight. Badge catching the light like it expected respect on sight. Chief Daniel Hale, the boy's father. His son's face changed instantly. Confidence returned, like a switch had been flipped. "There he is," the young man said loudly. "Told you." The chief scanned the courtroom, then locked eyes with me. He nodded once, not rude, not polite. Familiar. He walked forward with authority practiced over decades. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm but weighted, "I'm here regarding my son." I raised my eyes slowly. "Chief Hale," I replied, "your son is currently before the court." He nodded again. "Yes," he said, "and I'd like to resolve this quickly." Resolve. That word always shows up when consequences feel inconvenient. "I'm sure this is a misunderstanding," he continued. "My son got carried away." Things escalated. I looked past him, at the gallery. People who didn't get to explain their way out. People who didn't have rank. "Chief," I said evenly, "your son refused court instructions, disrespected officers, and mocked the authority of this bench." The chief glanced back at his son. "You need to calm down," he said quietly. Then back to me. "He's young," he added. "He'll apologize. We can move on." There it was. The expectation that an apology wipes behavior clean. "Apologies," I said, "don't erase contempt." The chief's jaw tightened. "With respect, Judge," he said, "I've served this city for 30 years. "I'm aware," I replied. "I've put my life on the line," he continued. I think that earns some discretion. I leaned forward slightly. Service earns gratitude, I said. It does not earn immunity. The boy scoffed. Dad, he said, you see what I mean? I raised my hand. Mr. Hale, I said sharply, you will not interrupt. He laughed. You gonna arrest me too? He said. That laugh landed hard. The chief turned fast. That's enough, he snapped, but the damage was done. I looked directly at the chief. Chief Hale, I said, do you believe your position gives you authority over this court? The question hung, careful, clear. The chief hesitated. I believe, he said slowly, that cooperation between institutions is important. That wasn't an answer. In my courtroom, I said, authority doesn't cooperate, it applies. Silence. The chief straightened. Judge, he said, voice firmer now, my officers enforce your rulings. And I issue them, I replied. That line settled the room. Your son believes the badge protects him, I continued. Today he learns it doesn't. The chief exhaled. What are you saying? He asked. I looked at his son. I'm saying, I replied, this case just became bigger than disrespect. The young man's smile faded. What? He said. I didn't raise my voice. You invoked power, I said. Now you'll face responsibility. I paused. Stand up. This time, he hesitated. Slowly he stood. And for the first time since he walked in, he didn't look sure anymore. When he finally stood, it wasn't respect. It was calculation. He stood because he felt the room shifting, not in his favor, but against his confidence. And people like him can feel that change instantly. He straightened his jacket and looked at me with a look I've seen before. Defiance dressed up as calm. Happy now? He asked. The chief turned sharply. Watch your mouth, he said. His son smirked. I'm standing, he replied. What else does he want? That word. He, not the court, not your honor, just he. I folded my hands on the bench. Mr. Hale, I said, standing isn't the issue. He raised an eyebrow. Then what is? He asked. Your belief, I replied, that this courtroom exists to negotiate with your last name. The chief took a slow breath. Judge, he said, this is getting out of hand. No, I answered. This is getting honest. I turned back to the son. You laughed at officers, I said. You mocked court staff. And you challenged this court's authority repeatedly. He scoffed. So what? He said. People challenge cops all the time. That's true, I replied. But you didn't challenge them as a citizen. He tilted his head. You challenged them as someone who believed he was protected. The room tightened. The chief shifted his weight. Judge, he said carefully, I can assure you my son will apologize. I looked at the young man. Will you? I asked. There it was, the moment, the chance to step back. He looked at his father, then back at me. No, he said. A few gasps escaped the gallery. I'm not apologizing, he continued. I didn't do anything that hasn't been done before. I nodded slowly. That's your final answer? I asked. He shrugged. My dad's got this, he said. That sentence did it. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. I removed my glasses again. Mr. Hale, I said evenly, you've now moved beyond disrespect. He frowned. You've entered contempt of court. His face changed. What? He said. You can't be serious. I am, I replied. The chief stepped forward instinctively. Judge, he said quickly, this isn't necessary. I raised my hand. Chief, I said, you don't get to interrupt this ruling. The chief froze. I turned back to the son. You were given multiple opportunities to correct your behavior, I said. You refused everyone. The young man laughed again, but this time it cracked. You're really going to do this? He asked. To me? I held his gaze. Yes, I said, because if not you, then who? Silence. I spoke clearly. Mr. Hale, I find you in criminal contempt of court. The words echoed. The chief's face drained of color. You're ordering what? The son asked. I didn't blink. I'm ordering you remanded into custody, I said, effective immediately. The son stepped back. No, he said. No, this is crazy. The bailiff stepped forward. Sir, he said calmly, please place your hands behind your back. The young man turned to his father. Dad, he shouted, do something. The chief didn't move, not because he didn't want to, because he couldn't. That's when the young man understood something for the first time in his life. Badges don't outrank the bench. As the cuffs closed, his voice dropped. You're ruining my life, he said. I answered quietly. No, I said. I'm introducing you to it. There's a moment after the cuffs close when the world changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, quietly. The holding cell isn't large, it doesn't impress anyone, and it certainly doesn't care who your father is. As the door shut behind him, I watched his posture change. The bravado drained first, then the certainty. He sat down hard on the bench, staring at the floor like it might explain what just happened. This is insane, he muttered. This isn't real. Reality doesn't announce itself. It just stays. Outside the cell, Chief Hale stood frozen. 30 years of command authority couldn't move him an inch. I stepped down from the bench and spoke to him quietly. Chief, I said, this is the hardest part of your job. He swallowed. I never thought it would come to this, he replied. Neither did your son, I said. The chief closed his eyes briefly. He's a good kid, he said. He just grew up around the badge. I nodded. That's exactly the problem. We returned to the courtroom. The gallery was still there, watching, waiting. I took my seat. Let the record reflect, I said, that Mr. Hale has been remanded into custody for criminal contempt. The clerk typed steadily. But that, I continued, is not the end of this matter. The chief looked up. Your Honor, he said. I turned to him. Chief Hale, I said, your son didn't arrive here alone. The room stiffened. He arrived with assumptions, I continued. Assumptions built over years of watching authority bend. The chief said nothing. You taught him the law, I said, but you never taught him where it stops. That sentence landed heavier than any ruling. Tomorrow, I continued, this court will consider sentencing, not only for contempt, but for the behavior that led him here. The chief finally spoke. What kind of sentence? He asked quietly. I met his eyes. One that will be remembered, I said. Not because it's harsh, but because it's equal. A murmur rippled through the room. I raised my hand. Let me be clear, I said. This is not about humiliating a police chief's son. I paused. This is about proving that the badge does not inherit immunity. The chief straightened slowly. Judge, he said, I won't interfere. I nodded. That's the right choice. Later that afternoon, the chief requested to see his son. I allowed it. They stood on opposite sides of the holding bars. You told me this would never happen, the son said bitterly. The chief didn't raise his voice. I told you, he said. The badge was earned, not inherited. Silence. You embarrassed me, the son added. The chief shook his head. No, he said. I failed you. That was the first honest sentence spoken all day. The son looked away. I can't fix this, the chief continued, and neither can my position. The young man's voice dropped. What happens now? The chief didn't answer. He didn't know, and for the first time in his life, neither did the son. The next morning, the courtroom felt different, heavier, not with anger, with expectation. Word had spread fast. When the police chief's son spends a night in custody for contempt, people show up, not to watch punishment, but to see whether the system flinches. I took my seat and looked out across the room. The young man stood when the bailiff called his name. This time, he didn't hesitate. He looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. The confidence that had carried him in the day before was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Mr. Hale, I said, you are before this court for sentencing on criminal contempt, as well as review of the conduct that led to your arrest. Yes, Your Honor, he replied. That title mattered now. Before I proceed, I continued, I want the record to reflect something. I looked directly at him. You were not punished yesterday because of who your father is. The chief lowered his head slightly. You were punished, I said, because you believed who your father is changed the law. The room was silent. Contempt of court, I continued, is not about words. It's about defiance of the idea that anyone must answer to the law. I paused. And yesterday you made it clear you believed you did not. The young man swallowed. His attorney stood briefly. Your Honor, he said, my client wishes to speak. I nodded. He stepped forward, slowly. I was wrong, he said, not just about what I said, but about who I thought I was. His voice didn't crack, but it carried weight. I thought the badge protected me, he continued. I didn't realize it was supposed to protect everyone else. The chief closed his eyes. I let the moment sit. Then I spoke. Mr. Hale, I said, this court has two responsibilities. One is to correct behavior. The other, I continued, is to send a message strong enough that it doesn't need to be repeated. I looked out at the gallery, at every officer who serves honorably, at every citizen who doubts whether fairness still exists, then back to him. For criminal contempt, I said, I sentence you to 30 days in county custody. A ripple moved through the room. He didn't react. You will serve that sentence, I continued, without special placement, without preferential treatment, and without interference. The chief lifted his head and nodded once. Additionally, I said, upon release, you will complete 200 hours of community service, not symbolic work. Those hours, I continued, will be served alongside individuals affected by abuse of authority. The young man's eyes lifted. Yes, Your Honor, he said quietly. And finally, I added, you will return to this courtroom 1 year from today. He looked surprised. You will stand here, I said, and tell this court and this community what accountability taught you. I brought the gavel down gently. This sentence is not historic because it is severe, I said. It is historic because it is ordinary. No applause, no outburst, just stillness. As he was escorted away, the chief stood, not as a police chief, as a father, and for the first time since this case began, I saw something stronger than authority in that room. Acceptance. Jail has a sound. It isn't shouting. It isn't threats. It's doors, metal on metal, locks clicking into place. That sound doesn't care who your father is. When Mr. Hale was processed into county custody, there were no whispers of special treatment, no nods, no recognition, just procedures, the same ones everyone else follows. Shoes off, belt off, name called without a title. He stood there holding a thin blanket, looking around like he'd been dropped into a language he didn't speak. This wasn't the movies. No dramatic confrontations, just waiting. The first night is always the hardest, not because of danger, but because of quiet. He sat on the bunk staring at the wall, replaying every word he'd said in that courtroom, every laugh, every assumption. There was no phone call that fixed it, no badge that opened a door, just time. Days passed. He learned quickly that respect in jail isn't demanded, it's earned quietly, by keeping your mouth shut, by doing what you're told, by not pretending you're something you're not. He cleaned, he lined up, he waited. The arrogance didn't disappear all at once. It cracked. He watched men older than him, men with nothing, still follow rules, still say, yes, sir, still stand when told. That confused him. One evening, another inmate looked at him and asked casually, why you here? He hesitated. For contempt, he said. The man nodded. Yeah, he replied. That'll do it. No laughter, no judgment, just understanding. A week in, the chief came to visit, not in uniform, just a father. They sat across from each other with a thick pane of glass between them. I can't help you, the chief said quietly. I know, his son replied. That was new. I spent my life enforcing rules, the chief continued, and I forgot to teach you how to live under them. The young man swallowed. I thought the badge was ours, he said. The chief shook his head. No, he replied. It was never ours. It belonged to the people. Silence. I'm sorry, the son said finally. The chief nodded. So am I. When the visit ended, the young man didn't feel rescued. He felt seen. By the third week, something changed. He stopped explaining himself, stopped defending, started listening. When correction officers gave instructions, he followed them. When others complained, he stayed quiet. Not because he was afraid, because he understood. When his release date came closer, he wasn't excited. He was reflective. He knew freedom would come back, but entitlement wouldn't. And that was the real sentence. 1 year can change a man, or it can reveal who he was always capable of becoming. When Mr. Hale returned to my courtroom, he didn't arrive with confidence. He arrived with awareness. No smirk, no crossed arms, no borrowed authority. He stood straight, hands at his sides, eyes forward. Mr. Hale, I said, you were ordered to return today. Are you prepared to speak? Yes, Your Honor, he replied. That title still mattered, not because he feared it, but because he respected it. You served your sentence, I continued. 30 days in custody, 200 hours of community service. Yes, he said, all of it. And what did it teach you? I asked. He paused, not for effect, for honesty. It taught me, he said, that rules don't humiliate you. Arrogance does. The courtroom was quiet. I thought authority was inherited, he continued. I learned it's earned, and lost easily. I glanced toward the back of the room. Chief Hale was seated there, not in uniform, just a man. My father enforced the law, the young man said, but I never learned how to live under it. He swallowed. I do now. That was enough. I nodded slowly. Mr. Hale, I said, this court doesn't measure success by punishment. I leaned forward slightly. It measures success by change. I looked at him carefully. You returned here standing differently than you arrived. I paused. That matters. The gavel came down gently. This case is closed. No applause, no drama, just closure. As he turned to leave, the young man stopped. He faced the courtroom. I want to say something, he said. I allowed it. To the officers I disrespected, he said, I was wrong. To this court, he continued, I was arrogant. And to the people who never get second chances, he said, I finally understand how rare fairness feels when it shows up. He nodded once and walked out. After the room cleared, Chief Hale approached the bench. Judge, he said quietly, thank you for holding the line. I met his eyes. That line protects all of us, I replied. He nodded. Outside, the city moved on. It always does. But something stayed behind. A reminder that authority without humility becomes corruption, that justice without consistency becomes theater, and that sometimes the most powerful lesson a court can teach is that no one inherits the law. My father used to say, Frank, when the law bends for one, it breaks for everyone. That day it didn't bend, and a young man learned that respect isn't taken, it's earned. I'm Judge Frank Caprio, and remember this, the badge enforces the law, the bench protects it, but accountability belongs to everyone.